What's different between Pano2 Pro and Pano2VR? Where are the approaches not really comparable? And this is a point now where it comes to learning new features or learning another way to achieve the same results. To compare the software interfaces is best done in a short live section where I point out where some stuff is in Pano2VR and where is this stuff to be found in Pano2 Pro. I've set up two projects from the same original material and quite comparable to point out the differences between Pano2VR and Pano2 Pro regarding the user interfaces. The look you are used to when you work with Pano2 Pro is now shown here. You have the opening screen with home, which is pretty much very simple stuff, as you have an opening list, recent project, and some presets to apply to. And the first important part is coming when you change to the Tour tab, where you have on the right side a changing properties panel, and on the left side you have stuff you do something with. In the upper part you have the project. If you click into the background, you have the project properties with some general text for it. You have here a map working for the whole project, kind of disabled because I haven't entered a Google API key, but it's not doesn't matter here. You can insert floor plans, and you have the description of the project and all properties for the project here when you click on this bubble. When it comes to groups, you can have here the group properties, and you have floor plans for groups and so on, and you have inside the groups you have the panoramas. You don't need to use groups, but it's for bigger projects it's very useful to have a structuring element like a group, which is here colored blue and red. When you click on a panorama, you have an overview below with the panorama and the hotspots. If you click on the panorama, you have the properties of the panorama, the angles and the starting view and so on. And if you click on a hotspot, you have the selection. What hotspot is it? What do you want to choose? And what is the hotspot doing? Adding action parameters and so on. This is pretty much the structure and layout of your tour, which is dealt with in the Tour tab. If you change to the Style tab, you get all the things you need to build up a user interface, which you have elements you can use on the right side, organized in the plugin library, and you can drag this stuff over to the left side, and the same for lens flares and points, and for map points, for web contents, video, on multimedia stuff. And on the left side of the workspace, you arrange these elements here in the spot style area. You can define what hotspots are used for what purposes, what do they look like, and what do they do. And in the upper part of the workspace, you have functionalities or layout elements, and you can define where this stuff is laying with a panorama menu, for example, is placed here on the lower right side. And in this style area, you can configure and lay out your user interface. The last is the build section. It's pretty much straightforward, running from Tour style build from left to right. And here you have some output features. It's not very much because the most stuff you can control here is predefined and you have no access to it, and only stuff you need to change is presented here. And if you go to build, everything will output it to your target folder. When you change to Pano2VR, the layout is pretty different. There are some elements which are common. First, you have here in the center, you have a permanent interactive view of everything what you're doing. What's happening in the Tour tab in Pano2 Pro, it's living here in the Tour browser. There aren't shown any connections between the panoramas, as it's with the arrows and the connections between the Tour in the layout window of the Tour tab. But if you click on a panorama, you have all the hotspots here. So the hotspot editor is kind of married with the Tour layout editor in Pano2 Pro here into and unified into an interactive view and a Tour browser. They are doing pretty much the same stuff as a Tour tab is doing in Pano2 Pro. You have a properties tab, which is kind of changing when you are doing different stuff in the main window. Here is a flyout menu you can use for adding hotspots. You can do it for adding multimedia hotspots like sound, still images, video, and lens flares. It's a little bit like the hotspot editor in the tour tab, where you can select predefined hotspots. And here is a view itself. You are always working in full resolution, and it's pretty performant. And you always can have nearly the same look and feel the later visitor will have. What is the build section in Pano2 Pro is comparable to the output section in Pano2VR, but here is not only outputted an interactive panorama you can put on your web server, but you have also have transformations and animations, and you can work with templates. It is much more flexible, a little bit more configurable as it is in Pano2 Pro, but you can do some amazing stuff with it. And here are some parts you have to learn something. You can control the viewing parameters. You can put user data. It is like the properties panel in the tour tab, where you can annotate all panoramas with different text and informations and geolocations. Here you have latitude and longitude per panorama. This is then thrown into the tour map you have. This is working with map providers. You can choose your own. Usually it's done with OpenStreetMap and Google, but you can throw in your own map providers, and you can use your own maps here. As you need here, add map, add floor plan. It's unified here in Pano2VR compared to Pano2 Pro, where these are two different elements. What's happening in the style tab, where you lay out the user interface your visitors will experience? This stuff is happening in Pano2 Pro in a different window, and it is kind of a sub-application. And this is a part where the most users which are switching from Pano2 Pro to Pano2VR get their first heavier learning experience when it comes to the skin editor. This little icon here, or you can have it here too. It's like cow skin as an icon for added skin. And this skin editor is opening in a separate application. It's named Pano2VR, but the skin editor is in fact an own program. And it's connected. And here you have on the left side, this is quite comparable to the left side in Pano2 Pro. You have elements. They are layouted in a certain way, and you have elements here you can use to really put into the canvas. And if you're going to Pano2 Pro, what's happening on the right side of Pano2 Pro's style panel, these are the elements you can introduce. It is these ones with containers and text and images and buttons and maps and some stuff I will go into detail later. And you have additionally, it is kind of an extended plugin library. You have a component toolbox, and here you can store predefined elements. They can be arbitrarily complex, and you can compare it pretty much to the plugin library you have in Pano2 Pro. These are the simple elements. These are the more sophisticated elements, and these elements are freely configurable. There are some stuff predefined and comes built in as out of the box. And here you can arrange all elements in a structure, top down, and organize it into containers and name it and position it. And here you have a canvas. That is what you don't have in Pano2 Pro. You don't have a visual representation of what you're doing there. And what's happening in the center part of Pano2 Pro's style tab, these properties and layout and all this stuff, what this is a position that is done in the canvas of the skin editor, and everything what's coming below is on the right side of the skin editor. Here the properties of different elements. This is changing a lot. What you're doing here, this buttons, text, and so on, this can be folded out, and you have a lot of stuff, and you see it at one glance that these elements are pretty much more configurable and more detailed as they are in Pano2 Pro. For this, there's the need to learn a little bit more, but this is a big benefit Pano2VR has over Pano2 Pro. This is really, really a powerhouse. I close it here, and usually you are asked to save it as it is a separate file. And that is very nice for building templates, and that you can just pop in a skin editor file into a Pano2VR project, and you have a complete user interface, and you only need to adapt and configure it. This is a short round trip over two user interfaces which are doing the same results, more or less, but in a different way. And that's what I'm dealing with when it comes to the more detailed videos after this introduction.